What you're listening to in the intro there today is a track I worked on using the topic of today's tutorial, AmpLion to Rock Essentials from a company called Audified. What's going on, VoiceOver warriors and keyboard ninjas? This is the Oreo Monster welcoming you back to Logic.band, a site full of tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you as a blind Logic, VoiceOver, macOS, and GarageBand user. If you haven't yet, type Logic.band into your web browser, and when you land on the site, sign up for the mailing list so you can get a free Getting Started with Logic course. So AmpLion to Rock Essential is a guitar amp sim made by a company called Audified. Now originally AmpLion 1 had a bunch of different amp models, but AmpLion to Rock Essentials is paring it down to just 3 classic amps that are beloved through rock and roll history. We got a Fender, a Vox, and a Marshall, and we have the combo cab for the Fender, the combo cab for the AC30, and 2 different 412 Marshall cabs to choose from. The best part is you can mix and match the cab, so you can use the Fender with the Marshall cab, you can use the AC30 with the Fender cab, etc. We also have 4 spots in front of the amp, so we can use up to 4 effects before the amp, and we can use up to 4 effects after the amp. The post-amp effects include stuff like digital delays and reverbs, whereas the pre and post-amp effect include all sorts of classic stop boxes. The best part is this plugin is very accessible, and part of the reason I wanted to touch on this and talk about Audified is they're very accessibility aware. They mention it on their website, and they go as far to offer a discount if you contact them through the website, letting them know that you're visually impaired. You can get a special discount, so you don't necessarily have to wait until there is a sale on any of their plugins. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at Rock Essentials. So I'm going to switch over to Logic and show you what we can do with it.
Logic Pro, Mixer, Window, Intrepid Guitar 1 Middle, Name, Text.
Alright, so that's the track that we're going to be using to start out the demo here.
Solo, on, switch.
And you see I got it soloed, so I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you. So that's just a dry DI guitar signal. Now, there are a couple of cool features in this amp sim, such as a automatic double track simulator, and you can also use 2 different cabinets and pan them hard left and hard right. So I'm going to kind of show you that as I walk through the plugin and show you the different parameters and how it works. Then I'll show you how I ended up using it in this project as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch this track over to be a stereo track. Even though still a mono track, I recorded a mono guitar signal on this track. I'm going to tell it to be a stereo track for now, so we can load a stereo instance of AmpLion to Rock Essentials so I can show off some of the features in it. So I'm in the mixer here in Logic, and I'm just going to jump to the top of this channel strip. So I'm going to hit VO Home.
Setting button.
I'm going to VO right arrow over to where I can change the channel strip setting from mono to stereo.
Gain reduction meter off. EQ but channel mode mono switch.
So you see right there, channel mode is mono, VO space,
stereo,
and that switched it to stereo. So now I'm going to go to where I can add an effect to this.
Input button, audio plugin button.
Okay, so VO right arrow over here to the audio plugin, VO space on this.
Menu 20 recent dim.
And I'm just going to hit VO end, so that's VO FN and the right arrow if you're on a laptop, to jump down to the bottom of this list.
Audio units submenu.
Where it says audio units, go into the audio unit submenu with VO right arrow.
Audio units submenu 20 items apogee submenu.
And I'm gonna VO down arrow.
Apple submenu Audifex Audified submenu.
And there we go, Audified. Now Audifex was right before this, and some of their plugins will show up under Audifex as well, but this one shows up under Audified.
Audified submenu 1 item AmpLion to Rock Essentials submenu.
There you see AmpLion to Rock Essential, and if I VO right again,
AmpLion to Rock Essentials submenu 2 item stereo.
And you see we got the stereo option here. So I'm gonna go ahead and load up the stereo version of this.
Intrepid Guitar 1 mid.
Alright, so now that we got that loaded up, I'm going to press VO end to jump to where we can see the table with the parameters. So that's VO FN right arrow if you're on a laptop. So I'm just going to hit VO end.
Busy, progress indicator. Busy, collapse, disclosure triangle.
VO space on that.
Expanded. Table, bypass, uncheck checkbox. Selected.
And now we can see the table with the different parameters. So I'm going to interact with this table.
In table, bypass, uncheck checkbox.
And the first thing we have here is a bypass checkbox. So we can bypass the plugin right from here. We don't necessarily have to stop interacting with the table and go to the bypass button that's built into the plugin next to where you can choose a preset. We can just bypass it right from here. All right, so if we VO down arrow,
input channel selector, L slider.
We got an input channel selector, and you want to just leave this on whatever is set to by default. If you put this on the stereo track that actually has separate information on the left and right, you can tell it whether to be fed from left, right, or both.
Input level, 0.0 decibel slider.
This is the input level. This basically sets the level coming into the plugin.
Output level 0.0 decibel slider.
And that's the output level, so that is going to be the final level coming out of the plugin.
Doubling, uncheck checkbox.
Now, this doubling thing, this is what I was talking about. There's an automatic double tracking feature. And when you load this up on a stereo track, when you open up the stereo version of Rock Essentials, you can turn this on and it will simulate a double track. So I'm going to play this again. So as you can tell, that's a mono guitar up the middle. But if I check this and play this again,
uncheck. Check.
Turn it on. So you see, it kind of emulates as if you double track the guitar part. Now, I still prefer to actually double track a guitar part, play it once, pan it left, then create a new track, and then pan that track right and play it a second time. But this will get you there quickly if you want to use this feature. Just remember, once you record it, switch the track to stereo, and then you can turn this feature on. By the way, if you notice, this does not sound very clean right now. It's actually pretty overdriven. That's one thing I did notice with this amp sim is the Fender, I believe it's on the Fender by default, starts out a little broken up and overdriven. So I do turn the input volume down to get it to clean up, and I'll show you that when I show you how I used it on this song. All right, let's keep looking at the parameters here. So I'm going to VO down.
Noise gate power, uncheck checkbox.
You got a noise gate, and if you check that, you can turn the noise gate on.
Noise gate threshold, 0% slider.
This threshold allows you to adjust when the noise gate kicks in. So what I do is if you turn this amp sim on and you got some noise when you're not playing, just let that noise ring out and then adjust the threshold until you don't hear the noise anymore. And then once you don't hear the noise anymore, you should be able to play, hear what you're playing just fine, but then it will kind of cut the signal off before the noise can creep back in when you're not playing. So that's the noise gate.
Hiss gate power, uncheck checkbox.
We got hiss gate. This does the same thing, but for hiss. I've not really messed with this one too much just yet. So, but if you guys do try it out, let me know what you think of it in the comments below.
Hiss gate threshold, 0% slider.
This pretty much works the same way. Once you turn the hiss gate on, you use the threshold to adjust it to where you don't hear any hiss anymore.
Pedals pre-power, check checkbox.
Now, if you remember, I said you can run up to 4 effects in front of the amp and 4 effects after the amp. So this section here turns on the effects before the amp. So you can bypass or enable all the effects before the amp by checking or unchecking this box here.
FX1 pre-select, none pop-up button.
All right, so now this is a section where you can pick what the 4 effects are, and I believe they're going to go in the order that you see them here: FX1, FX2, FX3, FX4. So it's as if you got 4 individual pedals plugged in before your amp. If you're a guitar player, you're probably going to understand what I'm talking about there. So you can pick from a number of effects here, and this is where you select the effects, and then as I VO down arrow,
FX1 pre-power, check checkbox.
this is where you can enable the effects. And if I keep going,
FX1 pre-parameter 1, 0.0% slider.
You see, these are where you see the different parameter for whatever pedal you selected here. And there should be 10 spots for these, so I'm just going to VO down arrow so you can see them.
FX1 pre-parameter 2, FX1 pre-parameter 3, FX1 pre-parameter 4, FX1 pre-parameter 5, FX1 pre-parameter 6, FX1 pre-parameter 7, FX1 pre-parameter 8, FX1 pre-parameter 9, 0, FX1 pre-parameter 10, 0.0% slider, FX2 pre-select, none pop-up button.
So you see, once you got to FX1 pre-parameter 10, it then went to FX2 pre-select. And this is where you can choose to select whatever effects you want to put in effects spot 2. So now, if I VO space on this, this just brings up a drop-down menu.
Menu, 16 items, jukebox Y84.
And these are the different effects that you can choose to put in front of the amp. You got a Vox Wah,
Radiomaster T-Boost,
Range Master Treble Booster,
Corny T-Boost,
another Treble Booster,
Melted Face Fuzz,
Fuzz Face,
Distortion Pulse,
Distortion Plus,
Overdrive 1,
Boss OD1,
808 Ice Scream,
Tube Screamer,
Graph EQ,
a Graphic EQ,
Para EQ,
Parametric EQ,
Mrs. Flanger,
Electric Mistress Flanger from Electro Harmonics,
Stoner Phaser,
Small Stone Phaser, also from Electro Harmonics,
Clone Chorus,
Small Clone Chorus, also from Electro Harmonics,
Memorize Delay,
Memory Man Delay from the same company,
Decomp,
Dynacomp MXR makes that same company that does the Distortion Plus,
BLCKLBL Ensemble 2,
Black Ensemble 2, Boss Chorus Ensemble. All right, so those are the different pedals you can choose. And once you choose one of these pedals, you'll see that the parameters populate. So
Decomp,
let's, for example, say I choose the decomp.
FX2 bypass, uncheck checkbox.
Now, if I VO down arrow,
Input channel selector, L slider.
You see, it puts me all the way back at the top.
Bypass. Uncheck checkbox.
Where the bypass button was. So I'm going to have to VO down arrow back to where the second effects spot was.
Input, output, double it. Noise, hiss, pedal, FX1, FX2 pre-select. Decomp pop-up button.
So you see, that's where we selected the effects.
Decomp power. Check checkbox.
So now, instead of just saying FX2 power, it says decomp power. That's where we can bypass or enable the dynacomp or the decomp as it calls it.
Decomp. Sensitivity. 80.0% slider.
And then you see, instead of saying FX2 pre parameter 1, it just tells us what parameter it is. So the parameter is sensitivity.
Decomp. Output. 40.0% slider.
And then the next parameter is the output. So
FX2 pre n/3. 0.0% slider.
So you see, there are only 2 parameters for this one. So the next 7 parameters are going to be blank again.
FX2 pre n/4. 0. FX2 pre n/5. FX2 pre n/6. FX2 pre n/7. FX2 pre n/8. FX2 pre n/9. FX2 pre n/10. 0. FX3 pre-select. None pop-up button.
All right. And so you see, this is where we can put the third one. So let's keep going down from here.
FX3 pre parameter 10. FX4 pre-select. None pop-up button.
Okay, and now we're where you can put the fourth pedal or the fourth effect in front of the amp.
FX4 pre pedals post power. Check checkbox.
And now this is the effects that are going to go after the amp. So this is where you can pick up to 4 effects to go after the amp.
FX1 post select. None pop-up button.
And there's a lot of the same ones in here. If I VO space on this, we'll see what we have
Menu.
here.
10 items check. Graph EQ.
Graphic EQ.
Para EQ.
Parametric EQ.
Mrs. Flanger.
The flanger.
Stoner phaser.
Phaser.
Clone chorus.
Chorus.
Memorize delay.
Delay.
Digi delay.
And now we have a digital delay.
Digiverb.
And a digital reverb.
BLCKLBL ensemble 2.
And the chorus ensemble as well. So a lot of the same pedals, but then you also have the option for a digital reverb and a digital delay as an option as well. But you see in the post amp section, we don't have any of the overdrive pedals as an option here because you usually wouldn't want to use an overdrive pedal after the amp anyway. All right, so
closing menu.
Escape. You'll see that this is laid out pretty much the same way as a prefix. There's going to be up to 10 parameter spots for each effect.
FX1 post power. Uncheck checkbox.
Plus the spot where you can bypass or enable the individual pedals. So if I keep VO down arrow through this.
FX1 post parameter. FX1 post parameter 2. FX1 post parameter 3. FX1 post parameter 4. FX1 post parameter 5. FX1 post parameter 6. FX1 post parameter 7. FX1 post parameter 8. FX1 post parameter 9. FX1 post parameter 10. FX2 post select. None pop-up button.
And then you see it's the same here. FX2 post select. You can select what pedal you want.
FX2 post power. Uncheck checkbox.
And then you can bypass or enable individually there. So I'm just going to VO down arrow through this till we get to the next section.
FX2 post parameter 1. FX3 post power. FX3 post per FX4 post FX4 post per FX4 post per cabinets power. Check checkbox.
All right, so after the post effects, you get to the cabinet power. When it comes to dialing in an amp sim, you probably want to start with the cab. So once you pick your amp, whether it's a clean amp or a dirty amp, the next thing you want to do is pick the cab first, and then you can go back to the amp head once you set up your cab and your microphone and everything and dial in the settings on the amp head. So that's just some general rules of when you're dialing a guitar tone with a amp sim. You want to start with the cabinet, get that dialed in, and then dial in the amp head. But you want to pick whether you want a clean sound or a dirty sound first. So you want to start with that part of it first. All right, so we're on the cabinet here, and this is where you can bypass the cabinet or leave it enabled. Now, if you're not going to use IRs in a third-party IR loader after this plugin, you definitely want to leave this cab sim enabled. So let's go down and look at the IRs that they included with this amp sim.
Cab A select. Bartender 112J pop-up button.
So cab A is using the Bartender Defender.
Menu. 7 items. Jukebox 212 gigabytes.
That's the Vox AC3212 combo cabinet.
Marshall 412 gigabytes.
A Marshall 412.
Marshall 412 G12A.
And another Marshall 412.
Load IR.
And then that you can use that load IR if you want to load an IR in the plugin. Now, I've not investigated this too much, but I didn't seem to find a way to load IRs into the plugin myself accessibly. So what I would probably do is just bypass the cabinet section altogether and then load IRs in a third-party IR loader. You can use Space Designer as a third-party IR loader as well for guitar amp sims. All right, so right now,
load IR.
Let's just hit escape. We're going to leave this on Bartender.
Closing menu. Cab A select. Bartender 112J pop-up button. Sell 2 items.
All right, now if I VO down arrow,
Cab B select. None pop-up button.
you can pick a cab for cab B as well. So like I said, you can use 2 different cabs at the same time.
Mic A select. 57 legend pop-up button.
You can pick a microphone. So we have a couple different options
Menu.
here.
10 item flat. Check mark. Flat.
Flat is no mic.
Check mark. 57 legend.
Is an SM57.
906 SQ.
Probably Sennheiser 906.
421 Sensei.
Sennheiser 421.
7B podcaster.
Shure SM7B.
121 Roger.
Royer 121 ribbon mic.
414 OMG.
AKG 414.
87 Oldman.
Norman U87.
451 pencil.
And I'm assuming that's a pencil condenser 451, which I'm blanking on the company that makes that.
5i Audition.
Audix i5, and those are all the different mics you can choose from. So a nice collection of mics that are commonly used on guitar cabs here. It's on the 57 by default. Let's
Closing
leave it
menu.
on that.
Mic A angle. 0.0 slider.
You can adjust the angle of the microphone, so whether it's directly centered on the cone of the speaker or off axis from the cone of the speaker a little bit, you can adjust the angle here.
Mic A position. 0.0 slider.
You can adjust the position of the microphone.
Mic A distance. 0.0 slider.
And the distance of the microphone, how close or far it is from the cab itself.
Mic A level. 0.0 decibel slider.
And then that is the output level of the microphone, so you can use that to turn it up or down a little bit.
Mic A pan. C slider.
Now you have a pan control here, and you do have the option to pan this cabinet all the way to the left or right, or leave it in the center. And if you use 2 cabs, you can leave them both in the center, and you can use the microphone level to adjust the level of each of those cabs individually so you can get the right blend. Or you can use these pan controls, so case in point.
C. In slider. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100.
So you can pan that over to the left.
80, 6, 4, 20, 24, 6, 81.
Or over to the right.
80, 6, 40.
Set that over to the left.
1 bar 1 beat
And
1
now
division
what we
1
can
up slide.
do-
Mic A level. Mic A mic A position. Mic A angle. Mic A select. Cab B select. None pop-up button.
Went back up to where it said cab B select.
Menu. Bartender 100. Jukebox 212 gigabyte. Cab B select. Jukebox 200. 1 bar.
So I just enabled the Jukebox 212 cab for cab B.
1 bar 1 beat.
And now you see there's another cab sound there. It's not all the way to the right anymore because cab B is in the center by default.
Mic A, mic A, mic A, mic A, mic A, mic A pan. Mic B select. Mic B angle. Mic B position. Mic B distance. Mic B level. 0. Mic B pan. C slider. In.
So we
C.
can
In slider.
go ahead,
In slide 20, 40, 6, 80, 1.
pan that all the way over to the right.
Out of slider. Mic B level. 0.0
Need
decibel
to-
slider.
I think my B might be a little quieter, so I
In.
can
0.0 decibel. In slider. 0.3 decibels. 3.5 decibels. 0.3 dec. 0.1. 1.7 decibels. 1.3 decibels. 1 bar 1 beat.
so I can adjust the level of the 2 microphones
Out of slider.
individually. So that's another thing is, like I said, you can use up to 2 of the cabs at a time. You can pan them hard left and right, or you can leave them both in the center and blend them in. It just depends on how you want to set up and dial in your guitar tone for what you're working on.
Mic B pan. 100 R AMP power. Check checkbox.
All right, so after the amps, we have amp power. So this is where you can turn the amp section on and off.
AMP select. Bartender Deluxe 65 slider.
And then this is where you can pick one of the amps. So like I said, there are 3 different
In.
amps in
AMP Bartender
here.
Deluxe 65 slider.
So right now this is the Fender.
In slider.
Interact with the slider.
Marshall 59.
That's the Marshall.
Jukebox 30.
And that's the Vox AC30. So you can just use the slider of VO shift left and right.
Marshall 59.
So VO shift left,
Bartender Deluxe 65.
VO shift left. And we're back on the Fender.
1 bar 1 beat.
So that's how you can change the
On up
amp
slider.
sounds. And then once you select which amp you want to use, like I said, the first thing you want to do is pick an amp, then pick a speaker cab, dial in the speaker cab settings, and then come back down here and dial in the amp tone.
Bartender channel. Vibrato low pop-up button.
So you can pick which channel. So like in the case of the Fender, you can pick a channel.
Menu. Vibrato high. Vibrato high. Bartender
high.
channel. Vibrato high pop-up button. Menu. For vibrato low.
Low.
Bartender channel. Vibrato low pop. 1 bar 1 beat. 1.
And then
Bartender volume.
you
50%
have a
slider.
volume.
Bartender bass. 50% slider. Bartender treble. 50%. Bartender reverb level. 0% slider. Bartender speed. 50% slider.
So this amp has a tremolo and a reverb built into the real amp. So they're both emulated here. So you can adjust the speed of the tremolo or the reverb level.
Bartender intensity. 0% slider.
And you can adjust the intensity of the tremolo as well.
Bartender vibrato. Checkbox.
And you can turn that on or off with that checkbox.
Bartender reverb. Checkbox.
And you can turn the reverb for the amp on or off right there as well.
Bartender pushed. On checkbox.
Push, I believe, is just going to make it a little bit higher gain, give it a little bit of a boost of some kind.
Marshall channel, parallel pop-up button.
And then same thing, you can pick what channel you want to use for the Marshall. So if you had, say, the Marshall selected, you wouldn't mess with anything in the Fender section. You just come down here to the Marshall section and adjust the parameters there. And if you're using the Vox, you'd go down to where the Vox section is and adjust the parameters there. So let's quickly go through some of these parameters for the Marshall section so you can kind of see what that looks like.
Marshall volume I, 50% slider. Marshall volume 2, 50% slider. Marshall bass, 50% slider. Marshall middle, 50% slider. Marshall treble, 50% slider. Marshall presence, 50% slider. Marshall master volume, 50% slider. Marshall model, SLP slider.
And this, you can pick a couple different models of the Marshall.
SLP, slide in slider.
If I interact with this,
HW, SLP.
so you have HW or SLP. HW stands for hand wired. Basically two different Marshall amps. I don't remember if it was a mod of one of the amps or if it's two different amps, but either way, you got some tonal variety here with the Marshall option.
Slider.
All right, let's get out of there.
Marshall master, uncheck checkbox.
And then that's the master.
Marshall impedance, Marshall master, uncheck checkbox. Marshall impedance, 16 ohm slider.
And then you can choose impedance, whether it's 16 ohms, 8 ohms, etc.
Marshall Brown, uncheck checkbox.
And that is another mod, the Marshall Brown, that gives you a slightly different sound. I believe that's emulating the sound of running it on a variax, so the amp is being starved for power, so you can overdrive it a lot easier. That's something that Eddie Van Halen used to do with his Marshalls back in the day.
Marshall pushed, uncheck checkbox.
And then you have the push, which Fender has, so I think this is something they built in to this amp sim to give you a little bit more drive or bite from these amps.
Jukebox channel, top boost high pop-up button.
And then same thing here, we got some parameters for the Vox AC30, the jukebox. So if you selected the jukebox, then you can just adjust the parameters for the jukebox here.
Jukebox norm, volume, 50% slider. Jukebox TB volume, 50% slider.
And TB would be top boost. That was something the Vox AC30 was known for, was a top boost. That was one of its features.
Jukebox bass, 50% slider. Jukebox treble, 50% slider. Jukebox speed, 50% slider. Jukebox depth, 0% slider. Jukebox tone cut, 50% slider. Jukebox master volume, 50% slider. Jukebox rev and left, 0% slider. Jukebox rev and CLR, 50% slider. Jukebox norm, bright, uncheck checkbox. Jukebox EQ type, standard slider.
So you see, you got a bunch of options here for the jukebox, and we'll go over what some of these things are when we talk about the different tones I dialed in with this plugin.
Jukebox tremolo, check checkbox. Jukebox reverb, check checkbox.
And you see this one also has a tremolo and reverb built in as well, whereas the Marshall did not.
Jukebox voicing, modern slider. Bartender imp curve, matched cab slider.
And then you have different amp curves, so you can do a matched cab.
Marshall imp curve, matched cab slider. Jukebox imp curve, matched cab slider.
And that's pretty much it for all the parameters in this plugin. So now we're gonna jump over to some different tracks that I have in this song, and I'll show you how I dial this plugin in to get some of the tones that I ended up using on this track. Thank you for checking out this episode. Hope you found that useful and helpful. If you got any tips that you'd love to share with the community, feel free to leave those in the comments below. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe both to the YouTube channel and to the email list found at logic.band. That way you can get a free Getting Started with Logic course, and I can keep you up to date on everything going on over at logic.band. If you'd love to go deeper on any of these topics or anything relating to Logic, VoiceOver, macOS, or GarageBand, you can book yourself some one-on-one training by visiting logic.band/training. If you'd love to support what's going on here at logic.band, then visit logic.band/support, where you can make a one-time or subscribe to make an ongoing Patreon-style donation. Links to all of these, plus supplemental tutorials and blog posts, can be found in the description. And as always, until next time, happy recording.